Tom, welcome to Constituting America's Constitutional Chats. We're hoping that you're going to tell us a little bit about some of these lesser known battles and heroes from the Revolutionary era. We also, on this Veterans Day, want to thank you for your service to our country, and we want to thank all of our veterans who are with us today, our veterans' families. We want to invite, if you are a veteran and you're in our chat or in our audience today, drop us a note in the Q&A, and we'd love to give you a shout out. Or if you have a relative who's a veteran and you want us to mention your relative, we'd be glad to do that. And finally, before I turn it over to you, Tom, we're going to turn it over to you for some opening comments. We would like to give away a few of your books today, maybe 2 or so of your books, and Jordan will do a little drawing. And anyone who puts a question or comment in the Q&A will be eligible. So Jordan will do our drawing a couple of times during the show today. So Tom, would you like to just give us some opening comments on our topic today, and then we'll go to questions?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for having me today. It's always a pleasure to see you. And the book that I wrote, book number 2 in this growing series, talks about the lesser known figures of the American Revolution. The first book talked about 3 very well known figures: Franklin, Washington, and Adams. And but there were so many other people that contributed to make our country independent. And those stories I found captivating, and wanted to put them in book form. And anyway, yeah, I think it's a good book. I personally like it. Pleased with what we put out. Great. I think 150 color images, a dozen or so maps that we created. And yeah, we're proud of what we put out, and hope the readers like it.
Before we go to questions, do you want to tell us maybe one of your favorite stories from the book?
Well, one of my favorite stories is the Benedict Arnold story. Not because Benedict Arnold was he was the battlefield commander that was most acclaimed in early America, until he wasn't, of course. But it's a fascinating story, and I won't go through the whole story, but here's a guy who really was a devoted patriot, just at the forefront of all the early efforts that we made in the invasion of Canada, the Battle of Valcour Island. He was at Saratoga, Fort Stanwix, and a hero every time. And then met the wrong girl, and things fell apart after that. But anyway, it's a fascinating story. Probably my favorite.
Well, thank you. Well, Jewel, we're gonna go to you first here with questions, and I think Jordan, I think we probably got at least 15 minutes for your segment, Jewel. So we're gonna turn it to you.
Thank you. This is such a fun topic, and nice to see you again and speak to you, Tom. We got to do some shows in the past, and I believe we did one of the book. I think we did a book. We call it a book club together as well. Yeah. And when you were researching this book, we know that you have a love of American history, and we know that it's been a passion of yours, and sharing that love as well has been a real passion of yours, and we've gotten to take part in it, Constituting America. But tell me how you were able to begin this journey for this book as you studied these heroes and the ones that we may not know about. What began? Because you probably had some stories floating around in your head. You probably knew some of them you wanted to cover. So what did you do when you decided to write this book? And I guess to add to that question, when did you decide to put this book together?
First of all, Jewel, great to see you again. Yeah, it's been too long since we chatted. Well, I wrote the first book, and as I was reading about the different campaigns, it occurred to me that there were so many great, interesting figures that should be written about, that I needed a second book on the American Revolution. And most people, I think, believe, these historians, we know all the facts already. And in my case anyway, I knew a little bit about it, about each one of these topics. And so for me, it was just riveting reading about and researching guys like George Rogers Clark, his conquest in the West, and Nathanael Greene in the South. And so I just wanted to make sure that the people that had made it happen away from the sphere of Washington, who did so much to make our country independent. I wanted that story told as well. And also the Spanish. I found it fascinating how much the Spanish assisted in our efforts. We all know about the French, of course, but in some ways the Spanish were even more instrumental in helping us secure our independence.
Wow, you gotta tell me a little bit about that. I honestly don't remember learning about Spanish involvement in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, Jewel, I didn't either, I'll be honest with you. But as I started diving more into the research, I probably read, I don't know, 15, 20 books and get independent sources, that sort of thing. For each book that I write about. And in 1776, the British were in Canada. I think we all know that. The British were also in Florida. And so they were on both flanks of what was the 13 American colonies. And to the west of the Mississippi was Spain. But Florida was Spanish before it was English. And they wanted it back. And why does that matter? It matters because they came into the war willing to help us, as the French did, to further their own nation's interests. And in their case, they had an eye on reacquiring Florida. And so they were the first ones to send gunpowder to Fort Pitt. They sent money through an American named Oliver Pollock to George Rogers Clark. That's helped secure the West when there was no money to send to Rogers Clark to build his army. And so George Rogers Clark was able to capture what ended up becoming the Northwest Territory. Back in the day, Quebec, believe it or not, sat across the Ohio River from Kentucky. That wasn't the American territory. And so George Rogers Clark captures the Northwest Territory, the second largest conquested territory in our nation's history after the Mexican War. But anyway, so Spain helps us take that territory back from Great Britain. And in 1779, a guy named de Valdes attacks the English colonies in Florida, Pensacola, Mobile, those places where the British had garrisons. And they captured Florida for themselves. And so when the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, they used a method of determining treaties called iudi possidetis, which means as you possess, so you shall possess. And that matters because it meant that Spain, because they had Florida, kept Florida. Still wasn't our territory. But now you fast forward and Spain was a weakening country. And if they hadn't captured Florida for their own interest during our American Revolution, we would have had British Florida and British Canada. And the British were too strong to push out of Canada, and they were too strong to push out of Florida. And so we would have not had access to the Gulf, and that would have been a big deal impacting our nation moving forward. And so although the French were very instrumental strategically and from a long-term consequence standpoint, Spain was probably more instrumental than France in helping America expand its boundaries. It's a long answer. Sorry about that, but there's so much that goes into it.
No, that was a great story, and it helps us give some more context to see that our way we learn about the Revolutionary War, it is important to learn about our heroes, but that there's more going on than just the first things you learn about. Because I do think it's important that we learn, of course, about Washington. You can look at it right in our Constituting America logo, but at the same time to learn about the influence of the logistics of the Spanish holding Florida is something that I, for some reason, in all these years, never have really thought about. We've learned about Marquis de Lafayette and the influence of the French, but not too much about the Spanish. You had mentioned that the story of Benedict Arnold, and how that was one of the ones that has fascinated you. You also had mentioned the other battles going on outside of the sphere of where Washington was, like in Nathanael Greene. What were some of the um, most impressive victories that you studied? Maybe ones including Nathanael Greene, but maybe there are some others. What were some of the victories that were impressive that you studied or outlined or covered in this book?
Yeah, good question. And Nathanael Greene, we could talk about him, although we won't be able to talk about his battlefield victories because he had zero. As much as a savior of the South as he was, he didn't win any fights. But his story is great because his story is a story of perseverance against a stronger foe, and his willingness to never quit. He famously said that he gets beat, he rises again, and he comes back for more. And that's true. He took over the army in the South after the disaster at Camden, where Horatio Gates was just his army was basically destroyed. Nathanael Greene comes south. Some say he was Washington's favorite general. It was a ragtag army with some good Continentals from Maryland and Delaware. But he lost at Guilford Courthouse. He lost at Hobkirk's Hill. He lost at Eutaw Springs. He lost and he lost and he lost, but he never surrendered the army. He always came back fighting more. He knew that he could hold out, that he could drive the British from the South. And what he did was just that. He fought Lord Cornwallis, a brilliant general, in many places, lost many places, but he always came back. They did have some victories in the South, like Battle of Cowpens, but that was Daniel Morgan, another brilliant commander. But the Nathanael Greene story it's really an American story, a guy who really didn't have much background in the military, but a great interest in it, and just wouldn't quit. And finally, Cornwallis got tired of chasing him around the Carolinas and not being able to knock him out. And he retreated essentially to Virginia. This is Cornwallis, where he got trapped on the peninsula. And Washington, of course, had him surrender at Yorktown. But he wouldn't have done all of that had it not been for Nathanael Greene's perseverance. If he had been able to secure South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, he would have stayed in the South. Part of the British plan, after they weren't able to defeat Washington in the North and they lost Saratoga, was to perhaps carve out Georgia and the Carolinas, because remember, at that point, they still had Florida. And so they would have had a truncated part of the colonies. And but Nathanael Greene is the guy that made it all happen. And he kept the army together. No food, no clothing, no supplies.
Quick question on that. Nathanael Greene having fought these battles and not having come out victorious, and also understanding that the Revolutionary War soldiers often had very difficult living arrangements, to put it mildly. How did he keep the men? How do you keep morale? How did he keep them together? Is there any was he a good speaker, or did he inspire loyalty among his men? Was that ever
both great leaders? Yeah, he led by example. He suffered with them, and he wasn't treated any different. Yeah, he was just a great leader. But, the men back then were made of hardy stuff. They believed in the cause, and they weren't going to give it up. And he wasn't the only one. He's the one that we were talking about. But Otho Williams and some of the other great commanders that supported him. But yeah, a great leader, kept his men together, kept them and talked to them about the importance of the mission they were on.
What was the furthest west that of any of the battles in the Revolutionary War that you may cover in this one? Because I know you mentioned a couple of places. How far west did we go to fight?
To the Mississippi, George Rogers Clark. Here's a guy, he took 170 guys, all militiamen, no soldiers, no money from Virginia. Remember, Kentucky was part of Virginia at that time. He sails down rows down the Ohio, goes cross country to Kaskaskia, Illinois, on the Mississippi, captures Cahokia, and those are the furthest west outposts in the American Revolution. And then that winter, through the dead of winter, he goes across to a place called Vincennes, Indiana, and captures a major fort there called Fort Sackville. And that drove the British essentially out of what became the Northwest Territory. And that's a great story also. Men, once again, not fed, not clothed, trudging across nowhere. Frozen feet, cold conditions, middle of the winter, and they made it all happen.
What was the through line maybe in this book, as you studied the names, some of them that you've said today so far, the names we don't hear about as much? What has been your takeaway putting this book together, America Victorious? What is one of the things that seems to be consistent across maybe these men, these stories, these victories?
Yeah, it was their deep love of country. I mean, a lot of these guys like Washington, Nathanael Greene, Benedict Arnold, these guys were, they had a couple dollars in their pocket. They had a lot to lose by losing the system that was made them wealthy. But there was a tremendous love of country back then. They loved the idea of what they were fighting for. They believed in it. And they weren't going to be pushed away from their cause. And it's just amazing the hardships they endured to make their country reality. I don't know if I could have done it. I'd like to think I could, but it's pretty impressive what these guys did. And that's the one thing I keep going back to. I wonder, do we have that today? And I don't know. There's still a lot of great patriots out there, but yeah, I'm glad they were there then.
A quick question as we're winding down. Is there any military like strategic innovation covered in any of these stories, or like are that these guys, some of them we may not have known about, that they did something really interesting on the battlefield? I know we've heard some cool stories in the Revolution about the British talking about the way our men fought, being unorthodox at times or things like that. Do you get to talk about any of those things in this book?
Yeah, remember back then there were some innovative things that happened, but warfare in 1776 wasn't much different from warfare from 1076. The fastest horse was the fastest way of getting a message somewhere. They had cannons, they had guns, but it was no, I wouldn't say that they had anything hugely innovative, but they relied on what they had learned from the past to succeed.
Thanks so much. I could keep asking questions about this all day. Got to pass on to our next panelist, and I enjoy the future getting to check out this book.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it.
And before we go to Mary, Jorn, can we do a drawing real quick from our audience?
Yes, of course. Our first winner of the book is Troella Tisnick.
Oh, great. Well, congratulations to Troella. We will be getting you Tom's book, Troella, and thank you for listening and for your great comments and questions. So we'll be back with Jorn a little later to do another drawing. And Mary, we're going to turn it over to you.
Lovely. Thank you, Kathy. Mr. Hand, thank you so much for being on today. And I do appreciate your time in the military and your service. And that's honestly the first thing I wanted to talk about, because I was looking over the book myself. I haven't fully read it yet, but I am excited. And I was wondering, your experience in the military, if it influenced, it definitely influenced your passion, I'm sure, for this subject. But I'm wondering if it also influenced the way you approached writing the book and your research and all of that. So could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Hi, Mary. Nice to meet you. Yeah, it certainly influenced my passion for it. Spending time at the academy. time in the service, you grow to love the military. At least I did anyway. And I think I approached it from a standpoint of a commander. Not that I was a battalion commander. I wasn't anything like that in the service, but I knew a lot of those kind of guys, and it's a tough thing leading men, especially in a dangerous mission. And so when I wrote about the great commanders, Daniel Morgan and Benedict Arnold and Nathanael Greene and so on, I wanted to approach it, their job, their mission, from a standpoint of the difficulty of leading men into harm's way, and so I emphasize, the courage it takes, and the lead by example sort of thing that has to happen to get people to follow you, especially in a cause that doesn't seem to be going in the right direction. And so I think that does influence how I write most of my books.
That makes sense. And I did notice that. I noticed it in the way you ordered and organized your book into the three categories, the North, the South, and the West. And I was wondering if that was kind of from that general approach, or if it was that you felt the stories kind of were in those three groups. What was the thought process behind that organization?
Yeah, I have found, for my mind at least, that it's easier for me to look at a campaign in total from start to finish, rather than saying, here's what happened in 1776, here's what happened in 1777 across the broad spectrum of the country. I have a linear mind, and so that's why I organized it that way. And the campaigns, they were fluid. They would continue to move from one battle to another, but they didn't tend to impact. They were still disparate. What George Rogers Clark was doing in the West was happening separate from what Nathanael Greene was doing in the South, not by choice, but because logistically it was just they couldn't support one another. And so as I wrote these stories, I thought it makes most sense to take the South in a microcosm and take the whole flow from when the British first tried to capture Charleston all the way through to when they evacuated Charleston. And in the West, when George Rogers Clark started his battles all the way up until the Battle of Blue Licks, the last major battle in the American Revolution of the West. I just felt that flow made it easier for our readers.
I love that. And I think it also brings out the other theme I see throughout the book, which is these, I guess you would say lesser known, but their impact wasn't less than other people's. It brings out kind of the theme of selfless service and the importance of everyone doing their part. Was there a passion behind that and you influencing this generation with the stories of the founding time and our independence? Was there a thought process that you wanted to bring that message out that we all should be doing our part today? Or I guess, how would you speak to that? Does your book do that, you think, in the stories it provides for others?
Yeah, now I'm going to give you my trade secret, Mary. That's a good question. Subliminally, if that's a word, I want people to think, oh yeah, we should be like that. And so that's, when I write, I think all writers want to influence. I think we all kind of want that. And we want influenced into the way I think that we think is the right way of thinking. And so we don't talk about political things and that sort of thing, but the bent that I have in my books, and even my new book that's coming out, good Lord willing, next fall, it continues to talk about and give examples of great patriotism. I want that thought to run consistently through all of my writings. And so I do put that in there. We don't overtly wave the flag. We do it covertly, perhaps, reminding people that what we have today didn't have to happen. And so, yeah, that's part of my secret sauce, I guess.
I love that. I'm glad I fleshed that out. That wasn't intentional, but I'm glad we got to hear it.
Yeah, you're the only guy, the only person that knows that. So keep it quiet.
I got you. Don't worry about it. Well, just like you, I'm also very interested in history. I was just talking to Kathy. I'm interested in even pursuing it in higher education. So I love it personally. I'm very passionate about it. But I do know that today there is a very unfortunate tendency. I think that's very new, for people to erase parts of our history even, or even not look up to history as much that used to be looked up to. So what would you say to those individuals that believe that these events that happened at the founding, while important, are not necessarily pivotal to learn about?
Yeah, you're right. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? How do we make it all interesting enough to and compelling enough so that people think, I want to know that story better. Um, I've always thought the way to fight an idea with a different idea, with a stronger one, and that's part of the message that I write about. And so, all we can do is put out what we think is a compelling story, all of us individually, and it will resonate or it won't, depending upon how we present it, and whether or not it's pertinent, how people view their lives. And so lots of presentation, Mary. We have to present it well. We have to make it interesting. There's a lot of competition out there these days. And if we don't make the great American story interesting, it's not going to be read. It's just the way it is. And so to that end, we have our books are full color books, 150 full color pictures, dozens of maps, 1,000 to 1,100 word segments that people can easily digest. And they can take away with it what they want. And if they want to learn more about Nathanael Greene, they can go to a deep dive into one of his biographies. And so that's the story behind how I guess the structure of our books. Make it interesting, make it easy for the consumer. You pick up your book, you take it to bed, you start to read. You read, 4 pages, you got a chapter done. It's an easy close. You close the book, you go to bed. You're not searching for that end of the chapter kind of thing. So it's consumer friendly. There's interesting anecdotes in there. Same sort of thing. You want to put a little bit more spin on some of these things, and with an eye towards making the consumer want to keep reading that book.
I love that. And I think that's wonderful, because unfortunately, how it used to be done, obviously, one of my favorite books is The Book of Virtues by William Bennett.
Oh,
And
sure.
yeah, I love it. It's awesome. And of those stories, I think they used to obviously be taught a lot more in education, and now they're not. So it's really important, I do think, to make them interesting, because that's just where we're at, unfortunately, with our generation. But they are beautiful, and once they're put before you, I think it is fascinating, and it does make people patriotic. And looking through your book, just seeing the amount of stories that are here, I was wondering, especially hearing the background that you wrote book one and then you had this kind of spillover of heroes. What was your initial spillover? And I'm sure in researching you found a couple more that you hadn't even heard about. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I guess the first one was the Benedict Arnold story, and Nathanael Greene, because Nathanael Greene served with Washington in some campaigns. Benedict Arnold got his first set of orders from Washington to go north and invade Quebec. And so those guys weren't included much in the first book, but I remembered their stories. And so I thought there needs to be another book to talk about these guys in greater detail. Daniel Morgan was also with Washington at the Siege of Boston. He goes north with Arnold to invade Quebec. And so these guys, I found the stories compelling. I wanted to dive more into it. And as I dove more into it, the second book kind of grew from those research things.
I love that. And then we were talking earlier about, the Spanish invasion, the Kentucky. Was that the last thing you found? Was that something you even knew about when writing the book? How did that come about in the process?
I knew very little about Spain's involvement until I started writing about the war in the West. And I came across a guy named Oliver Pollock. He was an immigrant from Ireland who came over to Philadelphia, became one of the wealthiest merchants in Philadelphia, moved his operations to Havana, Cuba, of all places, and then from there to New Orleans. And he's a rich guy. he's done well by the system, and all of a sudden the war breaks out. But he believes in the American cause, and he starts shipping his own money. He almost went bankrupt. In fact, he spent time in debtor's prison because he spent so much of his own money buying gunpowder and munitions for George Rogers Clark's Western Army when the people back east wouldn't send him anything, couldn't send him anything. And I just felt that was hugely compelling. And so then as that war in the West took root, the Spanish started, as I said before, eyeing Florida, taking that back from them. But I found that just fascinating, and I knew nothing about that. And I think I'm pretty well read. I have a 2,000 book library, and I knew nothing about it until I started writing this book.
Well, that's awesome. That makes me feel a lot better because I didn't know about it either. So that is amazing to hear about. But these stories are wonderful, and they bring to mind, to me as an author, you were talking about this earlier, how you think of themes that you want to bring out. I'm sure you also have target audiences as well. Who was your target audience when writing this book specifically?
Yeah, very clear. The everyday American. We had a cheese business up in Wisconsin, and we used to have historic posters all around the factory. The FDA loved that, but they didn't make me take them down. But anyway, and so my employees just say, well, tell me more about this guy. Tell me more about that guy. And it occurred to me that a lot of people want to know a little bit more about American history without reading a 10,000, or excuse me, a 1,000 page book by Meacham, who's a great writer, and some of the other famous writers, Rick Atkinson, great writer. And so when I started writing, I said, I'm going to write a book that the everyday American will find inviting. So the pictures and the maps and the length of the stories, 1,000, 1,100 word chapters, they can digest that. We took the book to a couple of publishing houses, and two of them wanted to publish the book, but they wanted to charge $70 for the book. It's like a coffee table style book. You've seen it, Mary. And though the average American can't afford that. And so with the help of Sherry Green, who has Left Brain Right, she's a gal that does all my website stuff, we created our own little publishing company called Americana Corner Press LLC, and we cut the middleman out, and we did the book ourselves. And so now we have this coffee table style book for $35 or so, or $40, whatever it costs, that guys can afford, so they get the high quality book at a low quality price. And that's a long answer to your question, but I wrote it with the everyday American in mind, and then we created this publishing company so they could afford it.
I love that. And making it affordable for the everyday man so that he can hear those stories is wonderful too.
Yeah.
And it brings to
Otherwise,
mind,
they don't, yeah, they need
Yes.
to know. They need to know.
exactly, and they can't know if it's so expensive, which is wonderful. I'm fascinated. That's so amazing that you made that company just for that purpose. That's so cool to me. To kind of wrap things up as my final question, the themes that come across through your book, we've talked about them. They're selfless service, doing what you can in your own position, which I think is wonderful for the everyday man when we have so much going on. So how would you suggest in implementing the stories of these influential people, how can we get involved? How can we be more selfless in our just everyday tasks as an American citizen?
Well, yeah, that's the big thing, isn't it? How can we, I don't like to preach about stuff. I struggle to do the right thing myself, so I won't preach too much about that. But yeah, I just think that if you read about our founding fathers and you realize the sacrifices they made, we need to make sacrifices too. And President Kennedy once famously said, "Ask not what your country can do for you; ask what you can do for your country." Great vision by President Kennedy, and I just think those are words to live by. And I always close my stuff with "May your love of country lead you." And I don't know, I believe in that. So I guess I do just say, if you can live by those rules, I think you do okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Hand. I so appreciate it. And thank you, Kathy, for having me on.
Oh,
Thanks,
well,
Mary.
thank
Good to
you.
see you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Joel and Tom. It's been fascinating so far. And before we go a lot further, I want to ask Jorn if he could possibly pull your website up, Tom, because you've made a great offer to our Constituting America listeners when we talk about the book being affordable. I think that you have provided a discount code for anybody watching today. And we're here on your website, Constituting America. No, I'm sorry. Your website, americanacorner.com.
Yeah.
americanacorner.com. And Jorn is showing our listeners where they can order your book. And so I guess you would click right there on it and scroll down maybe. And yeah, there's order now. There's several different options. And I don't know which button they would push for the to put in their discount code. Do you?
I think it's signed copies.
Signed copy. So, and we had said that the discount code is, let's see, I know we had the discount code. We put it in the Q&A, and the discount code is chats 15, CHATS 15. So if you are listening and you want to go on Tom's website and put in that code to order his book, it is CHATS 15 is your special code. So we hope everybody will do that. And Tom, I also want to say, I shared this with you, but when you talk about the book being for just everyday Americans, my dad passed away recently and it was very unexpected. And when we went into his apartment, we looked by the chair where he likes to sit and read, and there was one book sitting on his table beside his chair, and that was your book. That was your first book. And he had that bookmarked and he was reading it. And so I know my dad loved your first book. He never got to see your second book, but I just do encourage everybody. It's a beautiful book, and I know that people will love it whether they get it on the website or on our auction. It's wonderful. So we also want to thank our listeners who are teachers and students today. We have Jo Ellen Hoffman, who is watching with students from Good Shepherd Christian Academy. We have Cassia Small, who is watching with students from Ladera del Norte Elementary. And we have Brittany Stoll, who's watching with several homeschool students. So if you're a teacher and you're watching today with your class, go ahead and put your name in our Q&A and we'll give you a shout out before the end of the program. And we also want to thank our listeners from Las Vegas's KKVV 1060 AM on the radio dial. KKVV airs Constituting America's Constitutional Chats on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. So thank you to our Las Vegas listeners. So let's see. Before we go to audience questions, Jorn, do we have one more winner for the book? Because we have a lot of people who've weighed in here in the Q&A.
Yes, our second winner today is Thomas Whiteman. So congratulations, Thomas.
Well, great. Well, Thomas, we will get you a book. So thank you for listening and thank you for participating today. So Tom, going through here, we've got so many great questions. Carolyn Fredrickson asks, what is the most miraculous event that you have researched?
Oh boy. I think it has to be Washington crossing the Delaware. And we talked about that in the first book. This guy had no chance of succeeding. I mean, the army is shivering, and they're down to 3,000 guys, and it's dead of winter, Christmas night, of course, and to him and Henry Knox helped him cross, and John Glover and all that. But there was supposed to be 3 crossings that night, and 2 said, "No way, we can't make it." Somehow Washington got across. Somehow he surprised the Hessians, took Trenton. And, I think that turned the revolution. So I think that's the most miraculous thing that I read about. It's phenomenal to think about what these guys did. That the snow was red from blood from their feet. And they kept going. So good question. But there's a lot of great things that happened in the revolution.
So true. It's hard to choose for sure.
Hard to choose. Yeah.
And then we've got a couple of people want to know more about Benedict Arnold meeting the wrong girl. Peter Meany asks about that, and Terrence Durbin asks about that as well. Peter says, I didn't know Benedict Arnold met the wrong girl, which was at least a piece in his defection. Always interested in his story Andre was hung just down the road from where I live, and I often go to the 76 house where Andre was jailed. And then Terrence Durbin also asks if you could tell a little bit more about
Yeah,
that.
sure. Arnold was a widower. His wife died soon after he got injured at Saratoga. He goes to Philadelphia, a crippled man. His one leg was shorter than the other, walked with a limp. Still a great war hero. British had been pushed out of Philadelphia. One of the young families there in Philadelphia was a Shipman family. And the youngest daughter was a Peggy Shipman. And Peggy was pretty and flirtatious.
Mm.
And when the British were in town, Peggy warmed up to all the British officers. She was only like 14 or 15 at the time, but she was quite a catch, I guess. And one of the guys that she palled up with was John Andre. And when the British left, Peggy kept corresponding with John Andre, the British officer. Benedict Arnold comes to town, sees Peggy, gets smitten. He attacks her and her dad like he attacked the battlefield and quickly captured her heart. They get married, and she immediately starts writing to John Andre again, saying, hey, my husband is Benedict Arnold. He's not happy. The Continental Congress has treated him badly, denied him some promotions he thought he deserved. What can you do for us? Kind of thing. And Andre writes back right away. They didn't believe that Arnold would consider that. And so correspondence stopped for a while. Peggy starts it up again on her own when Arnold said no more. And the second time around, Arnold was talked into continuing with his treasonous activities, begs to get the command at West Point from Washington, gets it. And then, of course, he tries to give up the secrets. But if it hadn't been for Peggy Shipman and the connection with Major Andre, I doubt that he would have gone over to the British side.
Very interesting. And you just don't hear about that much. That's really
It's a
interesting.
fascinating to me anyway.
And then Rick Mayberry says, thank you for this podcast today. I always love hearing about obscure heroes of the Revolution. On that note, who and what is the story behind the hero he feels is the most obscure that most would not know about?
The most obscure hero. In mine, he's not an American. This Bernardo de Galvez, the Spaniard who captured British Florida. No one knows about him. Him and Oliver Pollock. Those are the two guys that worked from New Orleans to one help George Rogers Clark capture the West, and then capture British Florida from the Brits. And so I would say that that's the most obscure, the Spaniard, de Galvez, and the American Oliver Pollock working together to help the American cause. And the two theaters where people just don't read about it in American history books.
That's really very interesting. And then Cherie Gosh says, this is one you might have to look over your shoulder to answer because Cherie asks, are those Revolutionary time antique candle holders next to you? And have you ever read by candlelight?
The first question is, they are replica candle holders. And no, I have not read by candlelight. As I'm aging, I can barely read by regular light, let alone candlelight. So no, but I'd love to try it. I would like to know if anybody out there has, and can you still do it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think about it every now and then when we lose power, but I
Yeah.
try to start reading by candlelight, and you're right, it is very difficult. I don't know how they did that. So let's see. Lori Sherwood says, cannot wait to order the book and read. Peter Meany says, Mary asks great questions. Fascinating to learn about how Tom created the book to be consumer friendly and for everyday Americans. And of course, he says this is a comment, not a question. Bob.
Peter, by the way, I know Peter, yes.
Oh, you know Peter. Oh, that's great. That's great. And Mary, you're getting a lot of rave reviews here. Bob DeMartino says, just an observation, Mary is great. Let's see. Carolyn Fredrickson also asks, if you could meet one of your characters, who would you choose?
George Washington.
That's,
Yeah. He's a guy you can talk about all day.
I know, and you've been so supportive of Mount Vernon, and I know you do so much there at Mount Vernon.
Without George Washington, we don't have a country, in my opinion. It's just one
Yeah.
man's opinion, but I don't know. He's the man.
No, that is so true. And Joseph Polchinski says, fascinating discussion. And let's see here. Okay, Susan Yates asks, are your books on Audible? I love the history of our country and how we became what we are, but I don't seem to have enough time to actually read books like I used to. Thank you.
Yeah, no, short answer is no, they're not on audiobooks. I think we're going to go there. Sherry and I have been talking about it. Sherry, as I mentioned earlier, she does all the behind the scenes stuff that makes Americana Corner the success that it is. And we are talking about that. When I first started writing, I have a bias towards having a book in my hand. I just love books. And so I didn't want to do an audio, but I think I'm losing out on some consumers that want that space, a book in that space. And I think we're going to go back and do that. Book number 3 should come out in about another year or so on the Jefferson and Madison administrations. And I think we're going to try to make that one an audio option as well and go back and do the first 2 that time.
Well, that'll be great. That'll give us all something to look forward to for sure.
You know, that's a fascinating period too, Kathy. Lewis and Clark, War of 1812, the Barbary War. It's just a fascinating period. Once again, people just don't know much about.
Yeah, no, very true, very true. And, starting with the Declaration, the birthday of the Declaration in 2026, we have really a 15-year trajectory of 250th anniversaries coming up all the way through 1791, the ratification of the Bill of Rights. So there's so much to cover and celebrate coming up for many years from now. And John King asked a question, and he said it wasn't necessarily for everybody, but I just think it's such a good question. And I think on Veterans Day, it's a way to really close out our show today. John reminds us that the oath of the military is to defend our United States Constitution. And he asks, what is it about the Constitution of the United States that is worth risking everything to defend?
If I start talking, I don't, I don't know. I'm just glad I had the opportunity to serve. I'm just very proud. Thank you.
Well, I agree. And we want to again thank everyone, all of our audience members who are veterans who tuned in today. We want to thank you for your service, and we want to thank our family members of our veterans today, because we know that as family members, you all sacrifice so much as well. And we do have the greatest country on the face of the earth, and it is because of our U.S. military that keeps us free and keeps so many other people around the world free as well. So, Tom, we've just enjoyed having you so much on today's show, and we thank you for your great work in writing these beautiful books. And Jordan, do we have time for one more winner?
Yeah, I think we can squeeze it in here. Our final winner for the day is Brittany Stoll.
All right. Well, that is great. And to all our winners, we have your email addresses. So if we don't have your mailing addresses, watch for an email. We will email you and get your address, and we will get you a copy of Tom's book. We want to remind everyone to go on the website. If you didn't win a book today, go on AmericanaCorner.com. Use that code CHATS15, CHATS15, and get a discount. And we want to invite everybody to join us next week, Tuesday, November 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern, because we are coming up on the anniversary of the Gettysburg Address. And so we are going to be having a Lincoln Scholar on to talk about just the beauty of the Gettysburg Address and how it really embodies the principles of our Declaration of Independence and our country's founding principles. So we're very excited to have that discussion next week. So thank you so much. And Jewel, Mary, Tom, Jorn, any parting words?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity, Kathy. It's always a pleasure to see you and everyone else on the panel. And yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I know you have a lot of people you can bring on. So I just appreciate you giving me a chance. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate all of the support Americana Corner has given Constituting America over the years, and all you do for our country, for sure. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week.